My parents treated me like a servant. One day before Christmas, Dad smirked, "Your brother's friends are spending Christmas here, it's only 45 people." He expected me to cook, clean, and bow. I smiled, but that night I flew to London for a trip. When they arrived and saw the empty kitchen, his face turned pale, but the real surprise was still to come. I need you to understand something right off the bat. I'm not the villain in this story, even though what I did might make you think otherwise. My name is Sarah, and for 23 years, I was the family ghost. You know the type, visible only when there was work to be done, invisible when credit was handed out. My parents, Richard and Margaret Chen, had perfected the art of selective blindness. They could see me scrubbing toilets at 6 in the morning but somehow missed me graduating summa cum laude from law school. My brother Danny? He was their golden child, their miracle, their reason for breathing. 2 years younger than me, but you'd think he walked on water the way they talk about him. Danny played lacrosse in college, badly, and now worked at Dad's accounting firm doing. Honestly, I'm still not sure what. Filing? Existing? Being male? Whatever it was, it earned him a BMW and their undying devotion. Me? I was the built-in help. Every family gathering, every holiday, every random Tuesday when Mom felt like entertaining, guess who got drafted into service? While Danny lounged in the living room regaling everyone with stories about his latest tennis lesson, I'd be elbow-deep in dishwater, prepping vegetables, setting tables for people who looked right through me. The crazy part? I let it happen. For years, I convinced myself this was normal, that this was love. That families just had roles, and mine was the invisible workhorse who kept everything running smoothly. But this Christmas changed everything. It started 3 weeks before the holiday. I was home for winter break from my corporate law job in the city, which already felt like stepping backward in time. The house still smelled like Mom's jasmine perfume and Dad's cigars, still had the same beige walls and family photos where I appeared exactly 3 times out of about 50 pictures. I was in my childhood bedroom, still decorated like a 14-year-old lived there, when Dad knocked on the door. He didn't wait for permission to enter, just pushed it open and leaned against the frame like he owned the place. Which, technically, he did. "Sarah." His voice had that particular tone he used when he was about to ask me to do something unreasonable while pretending it was perfectly normal. "We need to talk." I looked up from my laptop where I'd been reviewing contracts for Monday morning. "What's up?" His face broke into what he probably thought was a warm, paternal smile. What I saw was the expression of a man about to drop a bomb and expect me to thank him for the privilege. "Danny's having some friends over for Christmas this year." I waited. There was definitely more coming. "Well, when I say some friends," he chuckled, running his hand through his graying hair. "It's a bigger group than we initially planned. You know how popular Danny is." The knot in my stomach started forming. "How big?" 45 people. The words hit me like ice water. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, waiting for him to laugh and say he was joking. But his face remained perfectly serious, perfectly expectant. 45, I repeated slowly. "Give or take." He waved his hand dismissively. "Some might not show, but we should plan for the full number. Danny really wants to impress his college buddies, and you know how important this networking is for his career." I felt that familiar sensation, like I was watching this conversation happen to someone else. Like I was floating above my body, observing this man casually inform his daughter that she'd be hosting nearly 50 strangers for Christmas dinner. "Dad, that's a massive undertaking. The house isn't set up for that many people. The kitchen, you'll figure it out." His smile never wavered. "You always do. Remember last Easter when you managed dinner for 25? This is just a little bigger. A little bigger. Like the difference between a puddle and an ocean. Where exactly are 45 people going to sit? We'll rent some tables, set up in the living room, maybe the garage." Danny had some great ideas about turning it into a real party atmosphere. Of course Danny had ideas. Danny always had ideas, for other people to execute. "And Mom's okay with this?" "Your mother's thrilled. She's so proud of Danny for maintaining such strong friendships. She's already talking about hiring a photographer to document everything." I felt a familiar sting. When was the last time either of them expressed pride in my friendships? When was the last time they'd even asked about my friends? "Dad, I think you might be underestimating what this involves. Shopping for that many people, prep work, cooking, serving, cleaning." "Sarah." His voice took on that slightly impatient edge that meant the discussion phase was over. "Danny specifically requested that you handle the food. He bragged to his friends about your cooking, about how his sister always puts together these amazing spreads. Don't you want to make your brother proud?" There it was. The guilt trip. The gentle manipulation wrapped in family obligation. Besides, he continued, you don't have any other plans, right? I mean, you're not seeing anyone seriously, and you don't have kids or anything tying you down. This could be fun for you, meet some new people, get out of your shell a bit. I wanted to scream. I wanted to point out that I was a successful attorney with my own apartment, my own life, my own plans. I wanted to ask when exactly I'd signed up to be the family catering service. I wanted to demand why Danny's social life was more important than my basic human dignity. Instead, I heard myself say, when would this be happening? Christmas Day, naturally. Brunch through dinner. Danny thought it would be nice to do a whole day thing, really make it special. Christmas Day. The one day of the year that was supposed to be about family, about togetherness, about peace and joy. And they wanted me to spend it serving strangers who probably wouldn't even remember my name. I'll need help, I said finally. Of course. Your mother will be there to supervise, make sure everything goes smoothly. And I'm sure some of the guests will offer to pitch in. Supervise. The woman who hadn't cooked a real meal since I was in high school was going to supervise while I single-handedly fed an army. Dad, I really think, Sarah. He pushed off from the doorframe, discussion clearly over in his mind. This is important to Danny. And what's important to Danny is important to this family. I know you understand that. He left me sitting there in my childhood bedroom, staring at the space where he'd stood, feeling like I'd just been run over by a truck. 45 people. Christmas Day. Brunch through dinner. I closed my laptop and lay back on my twin bed, staring at the ceiling where my old glow-in-the-dark stars still clung after all these years. Some of them had fallen off, leaving little adhesive marks like tiny scars. That's when the plans started forming. It began as just a fantasy, really. A little daydream about what would happen if I simply wasn't there. If I disappeared. If, for once in my life, I prioritized my own needs over the family's expectation of my endless availability. The more I thought about it, the more real it became. I had vacation days saved up. I had money in my savings account, money I'd been carefully squirreling away for years while living modestly and sensibly. I had a passport that I'd gotten for work but never used for anything fun. And I had a choice. For the first time in my adult life, I realized I actually had a choice. Over the next few days, I watched my family operate with the assumption that I would, of course, comply with their wishes. Mom started making lists of decorations and flowers, talking excitedly about what the photographs would look like. Danny called from the city with menu suggestions, specific, complicated dishes that would require hours of prep work. Oh, and Sarah? Make sure you get good champagne. Not the cheap stuff. These are important people. Important people. Right. Nobody asked if I was okay with this arrangement. Nobody checked if I had other plans. Nobody even seemed to consider that I might have feelings about sacrificing my entire Christmas for Danny's social climbing. The breaking point came 4 days before Christmas. I was at the grocery store, pushing a cart already overflowing with ingredients for the feast I was apparently preparing, when my phone rang. Danny. Hey, slight change of plans, he said without preamble. We're going to need appetizers too. Lots of them. These guys are big eaters, and we want to make sure there's enough food during the cocktail hour. I stood in the middle of the produce section, holding a bag of carrots, feeling something inside me crack. Danny, the menu is already massive. I'm not sure I can. Come on, Sarah. It's just a few more dishes. You're so good at this stuff, and it would really help me out. There's this girl I'm trying to impress, and her family owns a huge construction company. This could be big for me. A girl he was trying to impress. With food I would prepare. While he took all the credit. What kind of appetizers? I heard myself ask. Fancy stuff. Maybe those little salmon things you made last New Year's? And those bacon-wrapped scallops? Oh, and can you do that spinach dip in the bread bowl? People always go crazy for that. Each dish he mentioned represented hours of work. Shopping, prepping, cooking, ranging. Hours I would spend on Christmas morning while he slept in and then swooped in to play the gracious host. Danny, I need to tell you something. You're the best, sis. I knew I could count on you. I already told everyone about how amazing your cooking is. Don't make me look bad, okay? He hung up before I could respond. I stood there in the fluorescent-lit grocery store, surrounded by strangers doing their own holiday shopping, most of them probably planning quiet celebrations with people they actually liked. And I made my decision. I walked to the customer service desk and returned every single item in my cart. That evening, I went online and booked a flight to London. I'd always wanted to see London at Christmas. All those movies and stories about Christmas markets and ancient churches and the Thames in winter, it had always seemed magical to me. Romantic. The kind of place where you could walk down cobblestone streets and feel like you were inside a fairy tale. I booked a room at a small hotel in Covent Garden. I researched Christmas Day services at Westminster Abbey. I made reservations at restaurants that would be open on Christmas, places where I would sit across from strangers instead of serving them. The ticket was expensive, last-minute international flights always are. But as I clicked purchase, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: excitement. Pure, selfish, wonderful excitement. I didn't tell anyone. The next 3 days were surreal. I went through the motions of normal family interactions while this secret burned inside me like a happy fever. Mom made more lists. Dad talked about rearranging furniture. Danny called with additional requests. Could I make sure to have vegetarian options? Did I remember that his friend Marcus was allergic to shellfish? Each conversation felt like I was watching actors in a play I'd already left. The night before my flight, the family had dinner together, a rare occurrence that felt loaded with significance I couldn't share. Mom had made reservations at Dad's favorite steakhouse, and the conversation centered entirely around Danny's party. I just know this is going to be such a special Christmas, Mom said, cutting into her filet mignon. Having the house full of young people, all that energy and excitement. And great connections, Dad added. Danny's really building a solid network. That's how you get ahead in this world. Danny beamed, soaking up their praise like sunlight. Sarah's going to do such an amazing job with the food. Everyone's going to be so impressed. They all looked at me expectantly, waiting for me to express gratitude for the opportunity to impress Danny's friends with my unpaid labor. I'm sure it'll be memorable, I said. After dinner, I went home and finished packing. One suitcase, carefully chosen clothes for a week in London. My passport. My charging cables. A book I'd been meaning to read for months. I set 3 alarms for 4 a.m. My flight was at 8. As I lay in bed that last night, I thought about what would happen when they realized I was gone. I pictured Dad's face when he opened the empty refrigerator. Mom's confusion when she looked for me and found only silence. Danny's panic when he realized his elaborate party had no foundation. I felt a tiny flicker of guilt, and then I remembered 23 years of being invisible unless they needed something. I remembered every family photo I wasn't in, every achievement that went uncelebrated, every time my own plans had been dismissed as less important than Danny's whims. The guilt disappeared. At 3:47 a.m., I was already awake, staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding with anticipation and terror in equal measure. This was it. The most selfish thing I'd ever done, and somehow that made it feel even more right. I dressed quietly in the dark, grabbed my suitcase, and crept out of the house like a teenager sneaking out for a party. Except I was 23 years old, and this wasn't rebellion, this was revolution. The Uber to the airport was quiet, just the soft hum of the radio and the driver's occasional yawn. The city looked different at 4 in the morning, empty and full of possibility. Street lights reflected off wet pavement, and everything felt cinematic in a way my life never had before. At the airport, I checked in with shaking hands. The gate agent smiled and wished me a wonderful trip, and I realized she was the first person in weeks who had spoken to me like I mattered for my own sake, not for what I could provide. The flight was long but magical. I watched 3 movies I'd been meaning to see, ate airline food that tasted like freedom, and dozed fitfully while flying over an ocean toward a city I'd only ever seen in pictures. I didn't turn my phone back on until I was on the ground at Heathrow. 17 missed calls. 23 text messages. The first text was from Mom, sent at 7 a.m, Sarah, where are you? We need to start prep work. By 9 a.m, the tone had shifted, Sarah, this isn't funny. Danny's friends start arriving at noon. Where are you? Dad's messages were shorter but more direct, call me now. This is unacceptable. You're embarrassing this family. But it was Danny's messages that really told his story. Sarah, WTF? Mom says you're not here? This is my day. You can't do this to me. I need you here. Everyone's going to think I'm a joke. Call me. Sarah, I swear if you don't call me back, please. I'm begging you. I'll look like an idiot. And finally, sent just an hour before I landed, I hate you. I read through all of them while sitting in a black cab driving through London traffic, watching a city I'd dreamed about unfold outside my window. Double-decker buses, red phone boxes, people bundled in coats walking along sidewalks that had existed for centuries. I turned off my phone and put it in my purse. The hotel was perfect, small, charming, with a tiny lobby decorated with real garland and twinkling lights. The desk clerk had a soft Scottish accent and genuinely seemed happy that I was there. First time in London? She asked as she handed me my key. Yes, I said. First time doing anything like this, actually. Well, you've picked a lovely time for it. The city's absolutely magical at Christmas. My room was on the third floor, overlooking a narrow street lined with shops and cafes. I stood at the window for a long time, just watching people go about their lives. Couples walking hand in hand, families with children pointing excitedly at window displays, groups of friends laughing as they ducked into pubs to escape the cold. None of them knew me. None of them expected anything from me. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I spent Christmas Eve walking through the city like a ghost myself, but a happy ghost. I visited Covent Garden's Christmas market, where vendors sold handmade ornaments and mulled wine. I walked along the south bank of the Thames as the sun set early, watching the lights of the city reflect in the dark water. I had dinner at a tiny pub where the server called me love and the fish and chips were crispy and perfect. I sat by myself at a small table by the window, reading my book and listening to the conversations around me, fragments of lives I'd never be part of but felt grateful to witness. That night, I called room service and ordered chocolate cake and champagne. I sat on my hotel bed in my pajamas, eating cake with a fork and drinking champagne from a proper glass, watching a British Christmas special on the small television. I thought about what was happening at home. The house would be empty now, all the guests gone. They'd probably ordered pizza or Chinese takeout. Dad would be furious, Mom would be mortified, and Danny would be somewhere between humiliated and enraged. For the first time in my adult life, their problems were not my problems. The champagne made me a little weepy, but in a good way. Like I was crying for all the versions of myself I'd never been allowed to become, all the adventures I'd never taken, all the times I'd said yes when I wanted to say no. Christmas morning in London was everything I'd imagined. I woke up early and walked through the quiet streets to Westminster Abbey for Christmas service. The ancient stone walls, the soaring ceiling, the sound of hundreds of voices singing hymns that had been sung in that same space for centuries, it felt like being inside history itself. I wasn't religious, exactly, but sitting in that pew, surrounded by strangers who were nevertheless part of something larger, I felt a kind of peace I'd never experienced at home. After the service, I wandered through Hyde Park, where families were walking off their Christmas dinners and children were playing with new toys. I had lunch at a restaurant that served traditional Christmas dinner to travelers and locals who didn't have family nearby. The server told me about her own Christmas traditions in Ireland, and I found myself talking about law school, about my work, about my love of travel, things I rarely got to discuss at home. "You're very brave," she said when I mentioned this was my first solo international trip. "Most people are too frightened to travel alone, especially during the holidays." Brave. Nobody had ever called me brave before. That evening, I finally turned my phone back on. 43 missed calls now. Dozens of text messages. 3 voicemails from Dad that I deleted without listening to. A long email from Mom that started with "we need to talk about your behavior" and ended with "your brother is heartbroken." But there was something else. A text from Danny, sent late Christmas night. "Got your number from Marcus. This is Jessica, Danny's friend. Just wanted to say I'm sorry about what happened today. Danny told us you were supposed to cook for everyone but didn't show up. That's messed up. We ended up ordering pizza and it was actually kind of fun, but Danny was really embarrassed. Anyway, I hope you're okay wherever you are." I stared at that message for a long time. A stranger, one of Danny's important friends, was showing me more concern than my own family had in years. I typed back, "Thank you for the message. I'm doing well. I hope you enjoyed the pizza." She responded almost immediately, "Where are you?" Danny said nobody knows. "London." "London? Like England London?" "Yes." "Oh my gosh. That's amazing. What's it like? Are you there alone?" For the next hour, I found myself texting with Jessica about my trip, about London, about the service at Westminster Abbey and the Christmas market and the feeling of being completely anonymous in a foreign city. "That sounds incredible," she wrote. "I wish I was brave enough to do something like that." There was that word again. Brave. "Can I ask you something?" I typed. "What did Danny tell you about why I wasn't there?" "He said you had some kind of family emergency and had to leave suddenly. But then later he seemed really angry and said you just abandoned everyone. Honestly, he was kind of a jerk about it. A bunch of us felt bad for ordering so much food and then having to scramble like that. A family emergency. So that's the story they'd settled on, something that made me the victim of circumstances rather than the architect of my own choices." "Jessica, can I tell you the truth?" "Of course." So I did. I told her about the 45 people, about the expectation that I would single-handedly prepare and serve a feast for strangers, about 23 years of being the family's servant. I told her about the grocery store moment, about booking the flight, about waking up at 3 a.m. to escape to the airport. When I finished, there was a long pause before she responded. "Oh my gosh." Then, I had no idea. Danny made it sound like you loved cooking for big groups, like it was your thing. It became my thing because nobody asked if I wanted it to be my thing. That's really messed up. I'm so sorry. And honestly? Good for you for getting out of there. Nobody should have to cook for 45 people by themselves, especially on Christmas. That's insane. We texted until late that night London time. She told me about her own family dynamics, about the pressure she felt to be perfect, about the ways expectations could become prisons if you weren't careful. What are you going to do when you get home? She asked finally. That was the question I'd been avoiding thinking about. I spent the next few days exploring London like a woman possessed. I visited every museum, every landmark, every neighborhood I could fit into my schedule. I took a day trip to Bath and walked through streets that looked like Jane Austen novels come to life. I spent hours in bookshops and cafes, writing in a journal I'd bought at Harrods. But as my departure date approached, the anxiety started creeping in. I would have to go home eventually. I would have to face the consequences of my grand gesture. The night before my flight back, I finally listened to Dad's voicemails. The first one: left Christmas morning, Sarah, I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but you need to get home immediately. Your brother is humiliated, your mother is in tears, and I am beyond disappointed in you. This is not who we raised you to be. The second, from Christmas evening, 45 people, Sarah. 45 people showed up to our home expecting dinner, and we had to order pizza like college students. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this was? How could you do this to Danny? How could you do this to this family? The third, from yesterday, your mother wants to know if you're even alive. We've been worried sick. Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Now come home and we'll discuss how you're going to make this right. Make this right. As if I were the one who had done something wrong. I called my office and extended my vacation by 2 more days. Then I called a therapist I'd looked up online and made an appointment for when I returned home. If I was going to be brave, I might as well go all the way. The flight home felt different than the flight to London. Heavier. Like I was carrying all the weight I'd managed to set down for a week, picking it back up and preparing to bear it again. But I was different now. London Sarah was not the same person as before Sarah. London Sarah had walked alone through one of the world's greatest cities. London Sarah had struck up conversations with strangers and eaten meals in restaurants without apologizing for taking up space. London Sarah had made a choice and followed through with it, consequences be damned. I took an Uber directly from the airport to my apartment in the city, not to my parents' house. Whatever conversation was coming, it would happen on my terms, when I was ready. My apartment felt strange after a week away, too quiet, too familiar. But it also felt like a refuge in a way it never had before. This was my space, filled with my books and my furniture and my choices. I unpacked slowly, savoring the ritual of putting my London clothes away, placing my souvenirs carefully on shelves. I'd bought myself a small snow globe of Big Ben that played London Bridge is falling down when you wound it up. Tacky and touristy and absolutely perfect. My phone had been buzzing intermittently during the flight and the ride home, but I ignored it until I was settled and had a cup of tea in my hands. Proper English breakfast tea I'd bought at Fortnum and Mason. 13 new text messages, mostly from Mom asking when I was coming home to discuss this situation. I texted back, I'm home. At my apartment. If you want to talk, you can come here. She responded immediately, we need to have a family meeting. Tonight. Your father is very upset. Then Dad can come too. But we're meeting here. Sarah, this is ridiculous. Just come home. Mom, I am home. This is my home. If you want to have a conversation, it happens here or not at all. There was a long pause, then, fine. We'll be there at 7. I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing for war. I tidied my apartment, not because it needed it but because I wanted to feel in control of my environment. I showered and dressed in clothes that made me feel confident, a soft sweater Danny had once dismissed as too fancy for family dinner, dark jeans that fit perfectly, my grandmother's pearl earrings that Mom always said were wasted on me. I made a simple dinner for myself, pasta with olive oil and garlic, a salad with good tomatoes. I ate slowly, tasting every bite, reminding myself that I was allowed to nourish myself, to take up space, to exist for my own sake. At exactly 7 o'clock, they knocked on my door. Dad stood in front, his face set in the expression he used for disciplining employees. Mom flanked him, clutching her purse like a shield. Danny lurked behind them, looking anywhere but at me. Come in, I said, stepping back to let them into my space. They entered like they were visiting a crime scene, taking in my apartment with the kind of careful attention people reserve for places they'd never really seen before. Which, I realized, was probably true. In the 3 years I'd lived here, they'd visited maybe 4 times, and always briefly. Sit wherever you'd like, I said. Can I get anyone tea? Water? We're not here for a social visit, Dad said, but he did sit down on my couch, carefully, like he wasn't sure it would hold him. Sarah, Mom began, we need to understand what happened. Where you went, why you left, how you could do something so cruel to your own family. Cruel. That was interesting. I went to London, I said, settling into my reading chair across from the couch. I spent Christmas there. It was wonderful. London, Dad repeated, like I'd said Mars. You went to London instead of helping your family. I went to London instead of cooking for 45 strangers while my family took credit for my work. Danny finally looked at me. They weren't strangers. They were my friends. Name 5 of them. He blinked. What? Name 5 of your friends who were supposed to come to Christmas dinner. Tell me something about them. Tell me why they were so important that I needed to sacrifice my entire Christmas to feed them. Danny's mouth opened and closed. That's not. You know their names. I don't, actually. Because nobody thought to introduce me to any of them. I was just the hired help. Sarah, that's not fair, Mom said. You know we appreciate everything you do for this family. When? I asked. When do you appreciate it? When do you say thank you? When do you ask if I have other plans, if I want to help, if this is something I'm excited about? The silence stretched out between us. This is about more than Christmas dinner, Dad said finally. This is about your attitude lately. Your selfishness. You're right, I said. It is about more than Christmas dinner. I stood up and walked to my bookshelf, where I'd placed the snow globe from London. I wound it up and set it on the coffee table between us. The tinny melody filled the room while tiny fake snow swirled around Big Ben. For 23 years, I have been available to this family whenever you needed something. Cooking, cleaning, party planning, crisis management, emotional support. I've been the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who never says no. The music from the snow globe was slowing down, the melody getting deeper and more distorted, and for 23 years, you've treated that availability like it was my purpose instead of my choice. Like I existed to make your lives easier, to make Danny's life easier, to be the engine that kept this family running smoothly. Families help each other, Mom said quietly. You're right. Families do help each other. But this family doesn't. This family takes from Sarah and gives to Danny. This family celebrates Danny's mediocre achievements and ignores Sarah's actual successes. This family assumes Sarah will always be there to clean up the messes and never asks what Sarah needs in return. I sat back down, but I stayed on the edge of my chair, ready to stand again if I needed to. 45 people, Dad. You asked me to cook Christmas dinner for 45 strangers with 3 days' notice, and you couldn't understand why I might have a problem with that. We offered to help, Mom said. You offered to supervise. There's a difference. Danny was staring at the snow globe like it might bite him. I told everyone you were the best cook I knew. I was trying to show you off. You were trying to impress your friends with my unpaid labor while taking credit for it yourself. That's not, I wouldn't have. What did you tell them when I wasn't there? He looked up at me, then away again. I told them you had a family emergency. Why didn't you tell them I'd chosen to go to London? Why didn't you tell them I decided not to cook for 45 people I'd never met? Because that would make you sound like a... He trailed off. Like a what, Danny? Like a bad person, he said quietly. I leaned back in my chair. And what does that make you? What does it make all of you that the truth makes me sound bad? The room fell silent except for the ticking of my kitchen clock. We raised you better than this, Dad said finally. No, I said. You raised me to believe that my worth came from my usefulness to other people. You raised me to think that saying no was selfish and that putting myself first was cruel. You raised me to be a supporting character in my own life. I stood up again, too agitated to sit still. But I'm not a supporting character. I'm not the family's servant. I'm a person with my own dreams and needs and rights, and one of those rights is the right to spend Christmas morning walking through Westminster Abbey instead of cooking bacon-wrapped scallops for people who don't know my name. Mom was crying now, quiet tears that she wiped away with a tissue from her purse. We love you, Sarah. We've always loved you. I know you do, I said, and I meant it. But love isn't enough if it only works one direction. Love isn't enough if it comes with conditions and expectations and unlimited demands on my time and energy. So what do you want from us? Dad asked. His voice sounded tired. I want to be seen, I said. I want to be valued for who I am, not what I can do for you. I want to be asked instead of commanded. I want my own life to matter as much as Danny's does. Your life matters, Mom said. Then prove it. Stop treating me like I'm only here to make your lives more convenient. Stop assuming I'll always say yes. Stop taking credit for my work and then acting surprised when I get tired of being invisible. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. My city. My view. My life. I'm not saying I'll never help with family events again, I said without turning around. But I am saying that my help is a gift, not an obligation. And gifts can be declined. When I turned back to face them, they all looked smaller somehow. Deflated. We didn't realize, Mom said. We didn't know you felt this way. I've been trying to tell you for years. But it's hard to hear someone when you've already decided what their role is supposed to be. Danny was still staring at the coffee table. I'm sorry, he said quietly. About Christmas. About all of it. I didn't think about how much work I was asking you to do. I know you didn't, I said. That's part of the problem. Dad cleared his throat. So what happens now? How do we fix this? We start over, I said. We start treating each other like whole people instead of like roles in a play. We start asking instead of assuming. We start saying thank you and meaning it. And if we don't? He asked. Then I spend next Christmas in London too. They left about an hour later, after more tears from Mom, more apologies from Danny, and more uncomfortable silence from Dad. But something had shifted. I could feel it in the way they looked at me when they said goodbye, like they were seeing me clearly for the first time in years. The next few weeks were strange. My phone didn't ring every other day with requests for help. Nobody assumed I would be available for last-minute dinner preparations or emergency babysitting for the neighbors' kids. It was quiet in a way that felt both lonely and liberating. I started going to therapy twice a week. Dr. Martinez was a small woman with kind eyes who specialized in family dynamics and boundary setting. She didn't seem at all surprised by my story. Families develop systems, she explained during our third session. Everyone gets assigned a role, and the system works to maintain those roles even when they're unhealthy. You disrupted the system. Was I wrong to do it the way I did? I asked. To just disappear without warning? You've been giving warnings for years, she said gently. They just weren't listening. Sometimes a dramatic gesture is the only thing that cuts through decades of established patterns. She was right, but it didn't make the aftermath any easier. Mom called me a week after our confrontation. Not to ask for anything, just to talk. She told me about her book club, about a recipe she tried and failed spectacularly, about Dad's latest attempt to fix the garage door himself instead of calling a professional. I keep wanting to ask you to come help him, she admitted. But then I remember what you said about asking instead of assuming. You can ask, I told her. I might say no, but you can ask. Would you say no? I thought about it. Probably. Dad's perfectly capable of calling a repair service. But I might say yes to having coffee with you this weekend. There was a pause. I'd like that. We met at a cafe near my apartment. Mom looked nervous, like she was on a first date. She ordered a latte and fidgeted with her napkin while we made small talk about the weather and her commute. I've been thinking about what you said, she finally told me. About being seen. About being valued for who you are instead of what you do. I waited. I realized I don't actually know very much about your life. Your real life, I mean. Your friends, your work, your dreams. The word dreams came out hesitant, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to ask about them. What would you like to know? I asked. And so we talked. Really talked, maybe for the first time since I was a child. I told her about my work, about the cases I was passionate about the colleague I'd been having coffee with who might become something more. She told me about her own dreams, the ones she'd put aside when Danny and I were born, the art classes she'd been thinking about taking now that we were grown. I used to paint, she said. Before you kids, before marriage, before everything got so complicated. I was actually pretty good at it. You should start again. Maybe I will. She smiled, and for a moment I could see the young woman she'd been before she became just Mom. Will you come to my first art show when I'm rich and famous? Only if you promise not to ask me to cater it. We both laughed, and it felt like something heavy lifting off my chest. Danny was harder. He called a few times, conversations that started with apologies and evolved into defensiveness. He couldn't quite understand why I'd been so upset, couldn't see the pattern that had been so clear to me. But I always said thank you, he protested during one particularly frustrating conversation. When? I must have. I'm not a monster, Sarah. You're not a monster, I agreed. But you're not paying attention either. The breakthrough came 3 weeks after London, when Jessica, his friend from the party, apparently sat him down and explained exactly what 45 people worth of Christmas dinner actually entailed. She'd done the math, the shopping, the prep time, the cooking, the serving, the cleanup. She priced it out too, figuring that hiring actual caterers would have cost thousands of dollars. I had no idea, he told me when he called that night. I honestly thought you just threw some stuff together and it magically became a feast. I never really thought about the hours of work. Most people don't, I said. That's what makes it invisible. Jessica said I owe you about $3,000 in back wages just for Christmas dinner. Jessica's smart. Yeah, she is. There was something different in his voice when he said her name. We've been talking a lot lately. About family stuff, about expectations. She has a sister who went through something similar with their parents. How's that working out for them? Better, I think. It took time, but they figured out how to see each other as real people instead of just family roles. That's good. Sarah? His voice got quiet. I'm really sorry. Not just about Christmas, but about all of it. About taking you for granted. About never thinking about what you needed or wanted. About treating you like you existed to make my life easier. I felt tears prick my eyes. Thank you for saying that. I want to do better. I don't know how, exactly, but I want to try. Start by asking, I said. Before you assume I'll help with something, ask if I'm available. Ask if I want to help. And if I say no, respect that answer. What if I really need help with something? Then ask anyway, and we'll figure it out together. But Danny? Your social events are not emergencies. Your desire to impress people is not my responsibility. Got it. He paused. Are we okay? I mean, are we going to be okay? We're going to be fine, I said, and meant it. But things are going to be different. Different how? Different like you're going to have to learn how to cook. He groaned. I was afraid you'd say that. Dad was the longest holdout. For almost 2 months, our relationship consisted of polite but distant phone calls where he asked about work and I asked about his health, and neither of us mentioned Christmas or London or the way everything had changed. Then Mom's art classes started. She'd enrolled in a beginner's painting course at the community center, and apparently she was thriving. Not just the painting part, but the social aspect. She'd made friends with other women her age who had their own interests and opinions and complicated relationships with their adult children. Your mother is like a different person, Dad told me during one of our stilted phone calls. She's, I don't know, more herself, I guess. That's wonderful. She wants to turn the guest room into a studio. She asked me what I thought instead of just doing it. I could hear the confusion in his voice, like he couldn't quite figure out why anyone would ask his opinion about something that didn't directly affect him. What did you tell her? I told her it was a great idea. I mean, we never have guests anyway, and she seemed so excited about it. She is excited. She's been telling me about her paintings. They sound beautiful. You've been talking to your mother about art? We have coffee every couple of weeks. We talk about lots of things. Another pause. She never told me that. Did you ask? The question hung in the air between us. I could practically hear him processing it, realizing that he'd been assuming he knew everything about Mom's life the same way he'd been assuming he knew everything about mine. Sarah, he said finally, I think I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything, Dad. No, I do. I've been thinking about Christmas, about what happened. About what you said that night at your apartment. And I think maybe you were right. I sat down hard on my couch. About what? About being seen. About being taken for granted. About treating you like you existed to make our lives easier instead of like you had your own life to live. Dad. Let me finish. Please. His voice was rough, like this was difficult for him. I realized something watching your mother these past few weeks. Watching her discover this whole part of herself that I never knew existed. I realized I've been doing the same thing to her that we did to you, assuming I knew what she wanted, what she needed, what would make her happy. I didn't say anything, afraid that interrupting would break whatever spell was allowing him to be dishonest. I think we got so caught up in the idea of what a family should look like that we forgot to pay attention to what our actual family needed. We assigned everyone roles and then got angry when anyone stepped out of character. The roles worked for you and Danny, I said quietly. Did they, though? Look at Danny now. He's 21 years old and he can barely take care of himself because he's never had to. He doesn't know how to cook or clean or manage his own social life because we always had you to handle the difficult parts. He's learning. Because he had to, after you left. Because you forced all of us to learn how to function without you carrying us. He took a shaky breath. I'm proud of you for that. For leaving. For choosing yourself. I should have said that months ago. I was crying now, quiet tears that I wiped away with my sleeve. It was scary. Leaving like that. I bet it was. But you did it anyway. That takes guts. Jessica called me brave. Jessica's right. You are brave. Braver than I've ever been. We talked for another hour. He told me about his own struggles with expectations, about the pressure he'd felt to be the provider, the decision-maker, the strong one. He talked about watching Mom discover her art and realizing he didn't know what his own passions were anymore. Maybe you could figure that out, I suggested. Now that you don't have to spend all your energy maintaining everyone else's roles. Maybe I will. Spring came early that year, and with it, a kind of tentative rebuilding. We all started small, family dinners where everyone brought something, game nights where we actually played games instead of me serving snacks and cleaning up afterward, conversations where people asked questions and listened to the answers. Mom's art started showing up around my parents' house, small watercolors of flowers and landscapes that she'd hang quietly in corners like she wasn't sure they deserved wall space. Danny learned to make 3 basic meals and was absurdly proud of his scrambled eggs. Dad started taking photography classes and discovered he had an eye for composition. I kept going to therapy, kept setting boundaries, kept saying no when I needed to. It wasn't always easy. Old patterns have deep roots, and there were still moments when someone would automatically assume I'd take care of something, or when I catch myself about to volunteer out of habit rather than genuine desire. But it was getting better. The real test came the following Christmas. In October, Mom called to ask what I wanted to do for the holidays. What do I want to do? I repeated, because I wasn't sure I'd heard her correctly. Yes. What would make you happy? We could do something small here, or we could go somewhere, or you could host, or we could all do our own thing. Whatever you want. I thought about it. Really thought about it. I want to have Christmas Eve at my apartment, I said finally. Something cozy. Just the 4 of us. I'll cook, but I want help. Real help. And I want everyone to bring something, not just food, but something they're excited to share. A story, a song, a poem. Something that matters to them. That sounds lovely, Mom said. Can I bring one of my paintings? I'd love that. Christmas Eve was everything I'd hoped for and nothing like our old celebrations. Danny brought Jessica, which made us 5 instead of 4, but she fit seamlessly into our new dynamic. She helped with the cooking without being asked, complimented Mom's painting with genuine enthusiasm, and listened to Dad's stories about his photography adventures like they were the most fascinating things she'd ever heard. We ate dinner slowly, talking and laughing and passing dishes around the table like civilized people instead of me jumping up every 5 minutes to fetch something someone needed. When it was time for cleanup, everyone helped without being assigned tasks. This is nice, Dad said as he dried the dishes I washed. Different but nice. Different how? Calmer, I guess. More. Real. After everything was clean, we sat in my living room with tea and coffee and the cookies Jessica had brought from her favorite bakery. The London snow globe sat on my coffee table, catching the light from my Christmas tree. Sarah, Mom said, will you tell us about London? Really tell us, I mean. Not just the tourist stuff, but what it felt like to be there. So I did. I told him about the service at Westminster Abbey, about the conversations with strangers, about the feeling of being completely anonymous and completely free. I told him about the moment in the grocery store when I decided to return everything and book the flight instead. I was terrified, I admit it. But I was also more excited than I'd been in years. Were you angry at us? Danny asked. When you left? Yes, I said honestly. But I was also angry at myself for taking so long to leave. Are you still angry? I looked around the room at my family, really looked at them. Mom with paint under her fingernails and a confidence in her posture that hadn't been there a year ago. Dad with his new camera hanging around his neck, still learning how to see the world through a different lens. Danny holding Jessica's hand and looking at me like he was seeing me for the first time. No, I said. I'm not angry anymore. Good, Jessica said. Because I have something to confess. We all turned to look at her. That Christmas when Sarah left? When we had to order pizza instead of having a fancy dinner? It was actually one of the most fun parties I'd ever been to. Everyone just relaxed, and started talking to each other like real people instead of trying to impress anyone. It felt more like a family gathering than a networking event. Danny stared at her. Really? Really? Marcus said the same thing. He told me later that he'd been dreading another one of those stuffy dinner parties where everyone tried to talk about business and connections. The pizza thing was way better. Why didn't you tell me that before? Danny asked. Because you were so upset about the whole thing, and I didn't want to make you feel worse. But honestly? Sarah did you a favor. She saved you from hosting a dinner party that would have been way too much pressure for everyone. Danny looked at me with something like wonder. So you running away to London actually made my party better? I didn't run away, I corrected. I made a choice. And yes, apparently it worked out for everyone. Even us, Mom added quietly. It forced us to look at ourselves, how we've been treating you. It wasn't comfortable, but it was necessary. To London, Dad said suddenly, raising his coffee cup. To choices that scare us and changes that hurt. To London, we all echoed, clinking our cups together. Later, after everyone had gone home and I was cleaning up the last few dishes, I found myself thinking about the woman who had booked that flight to London exactly 1 year ago. She'd been brave, yes, but she'd also been desperate. Desperate enough to burn down her entire family dynamic just to prove a point. This woman, the one washing wine glasses in her own kitchen after a Christmas Eve spent with people who actually saw her, she was different. She was still brave, but now it was the quiet kind of bravery that came from knowing she had choices and the confidence to make them. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica, "Thank you for tonight. And thank you for last Christmas too. Danny's become a much better person since he learned how to take care of himself." I smiled and typed back, "Thank you for being patient with him while he figured it out. Thank you for going to London so dramatically that he had to." I laughed out loud in my empty kitchen. "You're welcome." Outside my window, snow was just starting to fall, big, soft flakes that caught the streetlight and made the whole city look like a snow globe. I thought about London, about Westminster Abbey and Christmas markets and the feeling of being completely, entirely free. I thought about next Christmas, and the one after that, and all the choices stretching out ahead of me like an unwritten story. For the first time in my life, I couldn't wait to see